Good morning. We thank you for being here today. I am Daniela Alberto and I'm from Group 4. We are here to tackle you about Philippine foreign relations with Africa. Africa is the second largest continent in the world in both area and population. There are 54 sovereign countries which are Angola, Benin, Algeria, Botswana, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Cabo Verde, Central African Republic, Comoros, Egypt, Gambia, and so on. And also, it is an almost entirely isolated landmass with only a small land bridge in the northeast, connecting the African mainland with Western Asia. Furthermore, Africa was divided into 5 sub-regions, which are North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa. Since Africa has over 3,000 protected areas with 198 marine protected areas and 50 biosphere reserves and 80 wetlands reserves. Democracy and governance in Africa. Africa has continuing reliance on foreign aid has increased the opportunities for bilateral and multilateral aid agencies to influence policymaking in the region. It says here that since Africa is continuing reliances on foreign aid, the opportunities there have increased for multilateral and bilateral agencies. The major donors have been meeting frequently in order to discuss development and dev problems and to devise aid strategies for African government. Most African governments have been in difficult situation and they have opted for easy way out. Foreign governments did not insist on good governance either. Even when policies failed, assistance kept coming. In turn, foreign aid has increasingly been linked to a set of prescriptions for changes in both economic and political policies pursued by African governments. The so-called New World Order has had significant effects on African governments, as the influence and interests of the Soviet Union in Africa declined and later collapsed with its demise. Western states and their organizations they influence gained considerably greater leverage over African governments, surpassing the general client-dependent relationship of the 1970s and 1980s. In 1980s, the international financial institutions announced that the implementation of structural adjustment and economic stabilization programs would be conditions for their assistance to African governments. The World Bank and the IMF or International Monetary Fund and the US Agency for International Development took the lead in demanding policy changes such as currency devaluation, removal of subsidies for public services, reduction of state intervention in agricultural pricing and marketing, greater concern to the development needs of rural areas, privatization of parastatal bodies, and reduction in the size and cost of the public sector.
I'm Paula Mae and I'm going to discuss the diplomatic relations of Philippines with Africa. So before going further, we'll define what diplomatic relations is. So it refers to the customary diplomatic intercourse between nations. It involves permanent contact and communication between sovereign countries. As a part of the diplomatic relations, two countries send diplomats to work in each other's country and to deal with each other formally. Going further, Philippines established diplomatic relations with 36 African countries including Angola, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Cape Verde, Republic of Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, Djibouti, Equatorial Guinea, Ethiopia, Ghana, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Ivory Coast, Lesotho, Madagascar, Mauritania, Malawi, Mozambique, Sao Tome and Principe, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Somalia, South Sudan, Tanzania, Togo, Tunisia, and Zambia. through the signing of joint communique in accordance with Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations of 1961, Vienna Convention on Consular Relations of 1963, and relevant principles of United Nations Charter and international law. In addition, the Philippines have 6 embassies in Africa, wherein Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, Libya, Morocco, and South Africa. So, this diplomatic relations is established through joint communique. It is a unilateral statement or a joint declaration of the participants in the negotiations with an account of both the positive result of negotiations and the disagreements or particular views of any of the participants. This is guided by Vienna Convention on the Diplomatic Relations of 1961. It is consolidated and codified many rules within 53 articles concerning envoys and diplomatic missions. These rules would apply to all countries that signed the agreement, whether they were sending a diplomatic agent or receiving someone on a mission from another country. Believing that an international convention on diplomatic intercourse, privileges, and immunities would contribute to the development of friendly relations among nations, regardless of their differing constitutional and social system. So another is the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations of 1963, the optional protocol concerning acquisition of nationality, and the optional protocol concerning the compulsory settlement of disputes. And lastly, the United Nations Charter codifies the major principle of international relations, from sovereign equality of states to the prohibition of the use of force in international relations.
The trade relations between Philippines and Africa is very noteworthy because of its significance and great impact towards both the state. Many would think that Africa is not a great choice for having a trade relations. Yet, contrary to popular belief, Africa has been very, very close to Philippines because of its effective trade relations. In fact, states in Africa has been in close relation with Philippines because of its wide-scale activities through economics. And one of these are the imports and exports. According to Department of Trade and Industry, the state of South Africa is the largest trading partner of Philippines in Africa. And the Philippines ranked South Africa as 36th largest trading partner in 2008. This was sparked by the visit of Nelson Mandela in Manila, whom is the first black South African president and an anti-apartheid icon in March 1997, which had also opened up to the ratification of the Philippine-South Africa Trade Agreement in 2002. The exports of Philippines through Africa in dollars almost exceeded to $500 million, and the imports of Africa to Philippines exceeded 200 million, shown in the graph of Department of Trade and Industry. Bilateral trade between the Philippines and South Africa has been an upward trend. Products like parts and accessories for motor vehicles, soap, milk and cream, coconuts, cashew nuts, many foods that is being exported to Africa, South Africa, like also glass containers, steel belted ties, has been widely exported through South Africa by the Philippines. Not only that, Egypt has been also among the Philippines' most valued trading partners in Africa, with bilateral trade between the two countries reaching 110 million US dollars in 2011. Bilateral trade between the Philippines and Egypt most recently stood at 17.656 million on 2014. In seeking expand economic as well as political links with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, Egypt acceded to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia in 2016, which boosted its relation with Philippines in terms of economics, politics, diplomatic relations, and many more. To add, in 2013, also, Kenya exported goods worth 463.38 million, which equals to $5.7 million to the Philippines. And also, the Philippines exported $7.23 million in the same year. Kenya's main export to the Philippines were vegetable, textile fibers, jute and other textile-based fibers, metallic salts, pyrosalts, vegetables, household equipments, and many more. Trade is pivotal in Philippines' prosperity because it fuels economic growth, supporting good jobs at home, raising living standards, and helping Filipino people provide for their families with affordable goods and services. International trade between Africa and Philippines is an important factor in living standards, providing employment and goods, and enabling consumers to enjoy a great variety of goods. Africa and Philippines welcome the diversification of their relations since its formal establishment in 1993. The two sides agreed to facilitate the signing of agreement on trade, defense, and science and technology cooperation. The two sides further agreed to intensify their cooperation in agriculture and economy, and to explore possible future joint ventures in the areas of mining, counterterrorism, and intelligence sharing. And that is why we could say that Philippines and Africa is a very close country in terms of trade relations.
Overseas Filipino workers in Africa. As of 2016, there are a total of 15,759 Filipino workers deployed in the continent of Africa, like in the state of Angola, Algeria, Morocco, etc. As you noticed, that it has a smaller percentage of overseas Filipino workers deployed in the continent of Africa compared to the other continents like Europe, Asia, South, and North America. There are factors why Filipino doesn't include Africa as the best place to find a job. First factor is the environmental problem. Some parts of Africa doesn't have enough water supply and electricity. Also, some parts of Africa is underdeveloped and poor. Factor number 2 is that they said that Africa is dangerous and should be avoided because there are armed groups who regularly kidnaps, hurt, and kill civilians. That is the factor you should consider before working at Africa. But since Philippines has diplomatic relations within some countries in Africa, Filipino workers can work cautiously and harmlessly in some countries like Algeria, Angola, and Morocco. In South Africa, Filipinos' reason why they migrated is to work in the fishing industry, healthcare industry, or as skilled workers or as engineers.
Political relations with Africa. First of all, what is a political relation? A political relation is a social relation involving intrigue to gain benefits and sometimes even authority or power. As an influential member of the AU, the NAM, and the Party of 77, South Africa has been seen as a dominant power in the continent of Africa. After their formal establishment in 1993, the Philippines has nurtured its ties with South Africa. The two sides agreed to help speed up the signing of trade, defense, and science and technology cooperation agreements. Both sides also agreed to expand their cooperation in agriculture and the blue economy, as well as to look into future joint ventures in mining, counterterrorism, and intelligence sharing. Philippine relations with South Africa reached a milestone when President Nelson Mandela visited Manila In March 1997, the Philippines-South Africa Trade Agreement was ratified in 2002 as a result of the tour.
Treaties and agreements in Africa. So to start with, there's a lot of treaties and agreements that has been passed between the relation of Africa and the Philippines for so many years. So we will be discussing um, a few of it because there's a ton. So under the bilateral relations, South Africa and the Philippines had been steadily improving. South Africa established diplomatic relations with the Philippines on November 1, 1993. Since 1994, the Philippines has had a resident embassy in South Africa. So, as what my co-member said earlier, that there is a lot of things to consider when establishing or building an embassy to a specific country. So, some of these are the budget of the establishment, the safety of the ambassadors, of the representatives, and also the goals or the national interest itself. The Philippines and Egypt. The Philippines and Egypt established diplomatic relations in 1946. Since its opening in 1960s until mid-1970s, the Philippines Embassy in Cairo was the only Philippine foreign service post in the Arab and African region. So, as we compare the continent of Africa to the other continents, we can say that there is a lot of difference between our relations, also because of the influence of the Western. So, and also one of the reasons is that the continent of Africa is also the same with the Philippines. It was also colonized by the world powers. Under the Philippine and Libya relations, the 1976 Tripoli agreement was made. This agreement establishes implementing structures and arrangements during a transitional period before a new regional autonomous government is established. So, just a trivia, the Tripoli is the city capital of Libya, and back in 2013, it is the founding year of ISIS, or the Islamic group of state of Iraq and Iran, and they were linked in the suicide bombings in the 2018 and 2019 year, and it's one of the hottest issues here in the Philippines. So, multilateral relations. The ASEAN Treaty of Amity and Cooperations is one of the foundational treaties of Pan-ASEAN. The treaty stated as its abode or intent is to foster perpetual peace, everlasting amity, and cooperation among the parties of the treaty. So, the Egypt, Morocco, and South Africa are the three main countries that has been participated or that has joined the said agreement or the treaty. Agreement. And because we all know that African countries is not they're not like other countries who are actively participating in and joining international organizations, because they are embracing they are embracing their traditions, which one of the reasons why.